My name is Samuel Hayes, and I turned 65 this year. For the past 40 years, I have lived my life behind the steering wheel, not of my own dreams, but of someone else's luxury. I worked as a private driver for Edward Monroe, one of New York's most successful real estate tycoons, and the man I once called my closest friend. Every morning at 6, I'd polish his black Mercedes until it gleamed, make sure the back seat smelled of cedar and mint, and wait by the driveway like clockwork. Edward trusted me with his cars, his meetings, his secrets, but I never envied his life. I had my own reason to wake up each day. His name was Ryan Hayes, my son. Ryan wasn't born from my blood. He came into my life one winter night 35 years ago, wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, too weak to cry properly. The adoption papers said no known family, but to me, he was everything I never knew I needed. My late wife, Margaret, and I raised him in a small rented apartment above a grocery store in Queens. We didn't have much, but we had love, and we had laughter. Margaret took night shifts at a diner, and I drove 14-hour days just to make sure. Ryan had clean clothes and his inhaler refilled. When Ryan got into Columbia University on scholarship, I nearly fainted with pride. I remember polishing Edward's Rolls Royce that morning, whispering under my breath, "You did it, kid. You're going to be someone." Years passed. Ryan grew distant. He found success in the world of finance, suits, meetings, expensive tastes. And somehow, somewhere, I went from dad to embarrassment. When his mother passed from cancer 5 years ago, I thought it would bring us closer. But instead, it built a silence that never left. He stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped needing me. And then, 2 months ago, everything collapsed. Edward Monroe, my boss and old friend, sold his company and retired to Italy. Just like that, I lost the job I had built my life around. No farewell bonus, no pension, no second chance. When I told Ryan, his face on the video call was cold, unreadable. "Dad," he said, adjusting his tie, "you can't live off pity. You're 65. Maybe it's time to grow up and stop depending on others." Those words hit harder than any accident I'd ever seen on the road. Depending on others? I had broken my back for him. That night, I packed away my old uniform, the black jacket with silver buttons, and sat by the window, watching the streetlights blur into streaks of yellow. I had nothing left except an old apartment, a few savings, and one secret Margaret and I had kept hidden for decades. Ryan thought I was a failure. But what he didn't know was that the house he now lived in, the car he drove, and the life he flaunted were all built on the fortune his mother and I had quietly secured long before he could spell success. The truth had been waiting for years, buried in a safety deposit box at First National Bank of Manhattan, under my name and hers. And the day Ryan turned his back on me was the day I decided to finally open it. The next morning, the air in my apartment felt heavy, not with grief, but with something quieter. A kind of calm that comes when a man stops expecting kindness from anyone. I made a cup of black coffee, put on the same gray jacket I'd worn for 20 years, and took the subway into Manhattan. People stared at the wrinkles on my hands, at the torn cuff of my sleeve, but I didn't care. They saw an old man. What they didn't see was a man holding a secret that could burn everything down. The First National Bank of Manhattan hadn't changed since the last time I walked through its marble doors. Same cold air, same ticking clock above the teller's counter. I approached the clerk, an impatient young man with slick hair and a fake smile. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" I slid a small brass key across the counter. "I need access to my deposit box," I said quietly. He typed my name. The computer beeped. Then his tone shifted. "Of course, Mr. Hayes, please follow me." The walk to the vault was silent, just the echo of my shoes against polished floors. The guard unlocked a thick steel door, and for the first time in 15 years, I stood before box 1179. I placed the key in, turned it slowly. The sound of the latch clicking open sent a chill down my spine. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. A sealed brown envelope with Margaret's handwriting on it. A black leather notebook tied with a fading red ribbon. And beneath them, a certificate, one that could change everything. It read, "Deed of Ownership, Lakeside Apartments, Ridgewood, New Jersey. Purchased under the name Samuel and Margaret Hayes Family Trust." My fingers trembled. That building, it wasn't just any property. It was worth millions now. Margaret and I had bought it 30 years ago with Edward's help. He'd given me insider advice on a piece of land that might appreciate. Back then, it was worthless, a rundown set of units by the highway. But now, it had become a prime development hub, a gold mine. I had kept it hidden even from Ryan. Margaret's letter was short but heavy with love. If you're reading this, Sam, it means time has done what we feared, taken more from us than we could give back. This building, it's our legacy, not for Ryan to have, but for him to learn from. Don't tell him until you know he's learned what real worth means. I read it 3 times before I could breathe again. Her handwriting looked like she'd written it just yesterday. Soft, neat and steady. A tear fell onto the paper, blurring the ink. That evening I called Ryan. He didn't answer. So I left a voice message, my tone calm, almost rehearsed. Son, I'd like to see you this weekend. There's something I need to show you. Something about your mother. 3 dots appeared. Then his reply came through as a text. Can't, Dad, busy, maybe next week. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I opened the black notebook, Margaret's old ledger. Inside were rent receipts, tenant names, and transaction logs that ran deep for years. Every line, every signature, was a reminder of how carefully she had planned our future. And now it was mine alone. For years I had lived like a man with nothing. But I had enough wealth to rewrite every chapter that life stole from me. As I sat there in that dim apartment, surrounded by silence and memories, I made a decision. I would stop begging for love that had already left. Ryan wanted distance. He would get it. But soon, he'd also get something he never expected, the truth he was never ready to hear. Because sometimes the worst pain a son can feel is realizing the man he disowned was the only reason he ever had a life worth living. And as I closed the notebook, the city lights flickered outside. Just as the phone rang, a number I hadn't seen in years. Edward Monroe. Sam? His voice cracked through the line. I heard what happened. You still got that building, don't you? My grip on the phone tightened. He wasn't supposed to know. No one was. The voice on the other end of the phone was unmistakable, firm, familiar, and sharp with the same confidence that used to fill the back seat of every car I ever drove. Edward Monroe. For 40 years I had listened to that voice give orders, close million-dollar deals, and dismiss people like pieces on a chessboard. But that night, it sounded different. Older, rougher, a little desperate. Sam, he repeated, you still got that building, don't you? I froze, gripping the receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. How do you know about that, Edward? A pause, then a sigh heavy enough to feel through the line. I know everything you did for me. And for Ryan. I kept your secret all these years, but now I need your help. Help! That word coming from Edward Monroe was like a lion whispering for mercy. I sank into the chair, my heart thudding. Edward, what kind of help are we talking about? He didn't answer right away. Just the faint hum of traffic through the speaker, then a low, shaky breath. They're coming after me, Sam. The people I sold my company to. I need somewhere safe to move my assets. Somewhere untraceable. The lakeside property could work. If we do this right, both of us walk away richer than we ever dreamed. For a long moment I said nothing. Memories of my years driving for him flashed before me. The expensive suits. The careless laughter, the way he'd wave off my thanks with a flick of his hand. Now the same man was asking for help. Edward, I said slowly, that building, it's all I have left of Margaret. I can't risk it. I'm not asking you to risk it, Sam. I'm asking you to use it. His voice softened, almost pleading. Think about it. You could make 10 times its value. Retire in peace. Ryan will finally see who you really are. Ryan. Always Ryan. Even Edward knew the wound. But beneath the words I heard something else, a tremor. Not fear for himself, but guilt. I recognized it because I'd carried it for years. Why are you really calling me, Edward? Another silence. Then softly. Because I know Ryan's in contact with them. The room tilted. What did you just say? Your son. Sam, Ryan, he works for the group that's been buying up old properties, including Lakeside Apartments. He's their lead acquisition analyst. My stomach twisted. It couldn't be true. Ryan, working to sell off the one thing Margaret and I built to protect him. No, I whispered. He wouldn't do that. He already has, Edward said. He sent me the proposal last week. I didn't know it was your property until I saw the trust name. For a moment, everything went silent. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock, even my breath. It felt like the world had paused just to let me drown in that truth. My son was trying to sell the only piece of my life that still had meaning. Edward's voice cut back in, sharper now. You need to meet me, Sam, tomorrow. I'll explain everything. I hung up before he could say more. My reflection in the window stared back. An old man, weary, betrayed, and suddenly awake in a way he hadn't been in years. That night I didn't sleep. I dug through Margaret's notebook again, flipping past rent receipts until I found a folded sheet of paper I hadn't noticed before. A letter addressed to Ryan, never sent. The edges were yellowed, the ink smudged from her tears. Ryan, if you ever doubt where you come from, remember this. Love is worth more than pride. Don't forget who you are. And don't ever trade your home for the world's approval. Mom. I read that letter until dawn, every word cutting deeper. At sunrise, I put on my coat, slipped the letter into my pocket, and took the train uptown to meet Edward. When I arrived at the old cafe near Central Park, he was already there, thinner, paler, eyes darting around like a man running from ghosts. He gestured for me to sit. You look terrible, Ed. He laughed weakly. I've been better. You still drink black? Always. He ordered 2 coffees, then leaned forward. Sam, they're watching me. They want Lakeside, and they'll use Ryan to get it. You can't trust him anymore. I wanted to argue, to defend my son, but the way Edward's voice trembled stopped me cold. He's not the same boy you raised. He's become them, but I have a plan, one that'll protect you and expose them at the same time. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were documents, signatures, bank transfers, company seals, proof that Ryan had already signed preliminary papers to sell Lakeside. I felt my chest tighten. He did this behind my back? They all do it behind someone's back, Edward said quietly. The question is what you'll do next. I stared at the documents. The cafe noise faded. I could only hear the pounding of my heart. You're suggesting I fight my own son? Edward shook his head. I'm suggesting you remind him who he's fighting against. He stood, left a few bills on the table, and turned to leave. Before walking out, he looked over his shoulder. You always said you wanted Ryan to learn what real worth means. Sam, maybe this is the lesson. As he walked into the gray drizzle of morning, I opened the envelope one more time. Inside, beneath the contracts, was a small folded note, not from Edward, but written in a familiar jagged script. Ryan's. Dad, don't take this personally. It's just business. R. The paper shook in my hands. My throat burned. My own son had written me off like a deal gone bad. Outside, thunder rumbled above the skyline. And for the first time in my life, I understood what Margaret meant when she said love and loss live in the same house. But Ryan had no idea what kind of house I was about to build for him. Rain fell like static against the window as I sat in my car outside the cafe. Edward's words kept echoing through my head. You can't trust him anymore. I wanted to believe he was wrong. I needed to believe it. But that envelope, Ryan's handwriting, his cold message, was still burning a hole in my coat pocket. Don't take this personally. It's just business. I'd spent 65 years working, bleeding, sacrificing, not for business, but for family. And now my only son had turned both into a transaction. For the first time in decades, I felt something stir deep inside me. Not anger, not grief. Purpose. That night I pulled out the dusty lockbox from under my bed. Inside was everything I'd hidden from the world. Old photographs, Margaret's letters, and the original deed to Lakeside Apartments, the one never digitized, never entered into any online registry. The key to everything. Margaret always said, never let the heart of something live on paper. Now I understood why. I spread the papers across my kitchen table, studying every date, every signature. The trust ownership wasn't just in my name. It was tied to a separate foundation Margaret had set up for community welfare, a technical loophole. It meant that unless I approved the sale personally, the deal could never finalize. Ryan hadn't known that. Edward hadn't either. And that was my advantage. The next morning I called Ryan. I hadn't heard his voice in nearly 2 years, not since Margaret's funeral. He answered after 3 rings. Dad, you okay? I've been better, I said quietly. Can we meet? Just talk. Sure, what's this about? About the building. And about Edward Monroe. Silence. A long one. Then he said, cautious. All right, tomorrow, noon, my office. His office was downtown, glass walls, polished marble floors, people in suits moving like machines. It smelled of money and fear. Ryan met me in the lobby, smiling like nothing had changed. Same eyes as his mother, but colder. He hugged me, but his body was stiff. A courtesy, not warmth. You look good, Dad. You look busy, I said. He laughed. Yeah, these deals don't stop. You know how it is. We sat in his glass box of an office overlooking the city. The irony wasn't lost on me. 40 floors up. He looked down on everything, including me. So, he said, leaning back, I'm guessing this is about the sale. It is. Dad, I know you're sentimental about that building, but it's time. It's falling apart. This deal could secure your retirement. You think I need money, son? I think you need peace, he said smoothly. And this is how you get it. Peace. He said it like it was something you could buy per square foot. I reached into my coat and placed the deed on his table. His eyes widened slightly. Where did you get this? Your mother kept everything, I said, including this version, the real one. He glanced over it, confused. This doesn't match the digital record. That's because your digital record isn't complete. For a moment, I saw the same boy who used to fix my tools in the garage, eyes squinting in confusion. But that softness vanished fast. You're saying the trust can't sell without your signature? Exactly. He leaned forward. Then sign it, Dad. Don't make this hard. I looked at him, really looked. And for a moment, I saw Margaret standing behind him in my memory, shaking her head. You've forgotten where you came from, I said quietly. You're trying to sell something that was meant to protect people like us. Dad, it's not like that. It's an upgrade. The neighborhood's dying. We're bringing in investment. You're evicting families. They'll find somewhere else. That's what you said when you left your mother's funeral early for a meeting. That one hit. His jaw tightened. I'm not here to be lectured, he said flatly. And I'm not here to be bought. He exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temples. You've been talking to Edward, haven't you? He called me. Then he's playing you. He's desperate. He wants to use you to move dirty money through that property. I'm trying to stop him. That froze me. Stop him? Yeah, Ryan said. You think he called you for you? He's laundering money. He's already under investigation. I've been cooperating with the feds for months. The ground shifted beneath me. Was that true? Had Edward set me up? Ryan leaned in, lowering his voice. Dad, I'm trying to protect you. But if you sign anything with Edward's name attached, you'll go down with him. Please, trust me. His words were sharp, convincing. Too convincing. Because behind that calm expression, I saw something flicker, fear, and guilt. I'd spent my life reading people. As a driver, you learn when someone's lying and in their eyes. Their breathing, the way their fingers tap. Ryan's hand was tapping on the table. Fast, nervous. He wasn't telling me everything. All right, son, I said softly. I'll think about it. He relaxed. That's all I ask. He stood, patted my shoulder. You'll see. I'm doing this for both of us. I nodded, forcing a smile. But as I left his office, I pressed the small button in my pocket and the voice recorder I'd brought with me. Every word he said was now mine. That night I went to see Edward again, only this time, his apartment door was wide open. Inside, lights were off. And on the floor, near the window, was Edward Monroe, motionless. The room smelled of whiskey and gunpowder. His revolver lay beside him. On the table was a single note. They found out. Don't trust anyone, not even your son. The police said it was suicide. But I knew Edward Monroe too well, and he didn't kill himself. I walked out of that apartment with my chest burning, my head spinning. If Ryan really was working with the feds, why hadn't they come for Edward yet? And if Edward was lying, who had silenced him so quickly? The next day I went to Lakeside. The tenants looked at me like I was their last hope. Kids playing in hallways, old couples sweeping porches, families laughing in the courtyard Margaret once designed herself. I realized then this wasn't just about property. It was about people, and I wasn't losing them to corruption or greed. Not without a fight. I walked to the basement and opened the old maintenance office. The metal cabinet still stood against the wall, untouched for decades. Behind it, hidden in a hollow section of concrete, was an old safety box, something Margaret and I had built when we first bought the place. Inside was a flash drive, one I hadn't seen in years. When I plugged it into my laptop that night, a file appeared on the screen. Lakeside Foundation, Original Contracts, PDF. As I opened it, I froze, because the signatures on those old papers didn't just include mine and Margaret's. There was a third name, Edward Monroe, and under his, a fourth, Ryan Monroe. My heart stopped. My son's last name wasn't mine in that document. It was his mother's, which meant Margaret had known. She had known Edward's secret connection all along. The truth unraveled fast, hitting me like a storm. Ryan wasn't just my son. He was Edward's too. And suddenly every strange look, Every shared hesitation, every unspoken moment made sense. Edward hadn't called me to save me. He'd called because he was dying, and he didn't want his son, our son, to destroy everything we'd built. The walls seemed to close in. Everything I believed in, a family loyalty legacy, had been twisted by lies. But one thing was clear now. I wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for the truth. And when the truth came out, Ryan would finally see which father he'd chosen to betray. I didn't sleep that night. The flash drive sat on the table like a curse. Ryan Monroe, Edward Monroe, Margaret. The puzzle pieces twisted and locked into place. My entire life had been built on lies, and I was the fool who called it love. I sat by the window as dawn cracked the horizon, light spilling over the quiet city. For 65 years I'd been a driver, a husband, a father. Now I was something else, a man with nothing left to lose. That morning I visited Lakeside again. The tenants smiled at me like always, unaware that their home was the heart of a war. Old Mrs. Alvarez handed me a coffee. "Mr. Samuel, you look tired. You okay?" I smiled faintly. "Just sorting through old memories." She nodded, walking away. And I looked around, at the peeling paint, the creaking pipes, the laughter of kids echoing through the hallways. Margaret's dream, Ryan's inheritance, Edward's guilt, my burden. And I realized, if I didn't act soon, everything would be gone. That night I went through Edward's apartment again. The police had sealed it, but locks never stopped a man who'd been fixing things his whole life. I pried the door open and stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy with the smell of gunpowder and secrets. I checked the drawers, the safe, the desk. Nothing. Then I noticed the bookshelf. One book slightly pulled out. The Art of War. Behind it was a small black envelope. Inside, a USB, labeled for SM only. My heart hammered. My initials. I plugged it in back at home. There was one video file. Edward appeared on screen, looking older, tired. His voice shook. "If you're watching this, Sam, I'm probably gone. I've made mistakes, too many. But the biggest was not telling you the truth about Ryan. He's mine. Margaret and we thought you'd never find out. She wanted to tell you before she died. But you were too broken after the hospital bills. She begged me to protect him, our son. Your son, I couldn't. I was weak. And now he's lost himself chasing money and power. You're the only one who can stop him before he destroys what's left of us." The screen went black. I sat frozen, every heartbeat louder than thunder. All those years, every bedtime story, every scraped knee I bandaged, every "I love you, Dad." None of it was built on blood, but it was built on love. And love, real love, didn't need DNA to exist. I wiped my eyes, steadying my breath. If Edward thought I'd crumble, he was wrong. I wasn't going to destroy Ryan. I was going to save him, even if it meant burning everything else to ash. The next day, I went to Ryan's office unannounced. The receptionist hesitated when she saw me. "Sir, Mr. Monroe is in a meeting. Tell him his father's here." That word, father, got me through faster than any appointment could. He met me in the hallway, tense. "Dad, this isn't a good time. We need to talk, alone." We walked into a conference room. I locked the door. He looked irritated. "What's going on?" I tossed the USB across the table. "That's from Edward. Watch it." His face went pale. "You broke into his place?" "I found the truth." "You shouldn't have done that." "I had to. Because you've been lying to me since the day your mother died." He didn't deny it. Just looked away, jaw tight. "So now you know. I know you're his son. And I know you're mine too, whether you like it or not." His eyes glistened, a mix of guilt and defiance. "You don't get it, Dad. He offered me everything you couldn't. Connections, power. I was tired of being poor. Tired of scraping by while you played hero, fixing cars and driving people richer than us. I wanted more." "You think money makes you more?" I snapped. "You think it gives you peace?" "I worked my whole life so you wouldn't grow up bitter. But look at you now. You've turned into the very thing I protected you from." He slammed his hand on the table. "I did what I had to do." "You lived your whole life being small." "I won't." The words cut deep. But there was no fear in me anymore. Only truth. "You think Edward died for your future?" "No, he died because of it. He was being blackmailed by his own partners. And now they're coming for you." Ryan froze. "What?" "You're being set up, son. They'll pin the whole laundering scheme on you." "I've seen this game before. You're the scapegoat." His breathing changed, short, panicked. He sat down slowly. "Dad, what do I do?" For the first time in years, He called me Dad again. It was barely a whisper, but it hit me harder than any confession could. You do what I say, I said firmly. We play their game, but on our terms. I pulled out my small recorder, the one from our last meeting. I have your confession on tape. You were part of it, yes, but you also admitted to helping the investigation. That gives us leverage. He looked at me shocked. You recorded me? You lied to me for years, I said quietly. Now we're even. For the first time, I saw fear. Real fear in his eyes. Not of me, but of what he'd become. That night, I called Detective Harper, the only honest cop I'd known back when I drove for the Bradleys. He owed me a favor. I sent him a copy of the recording, along with Edward's video. You'll want to see this, I said. There's more going on than suicide. Harper agreed to meet in 2 days. 2 days, and that's all I had to prepare. But before I could rest, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging, or Ryan pays the price. Attached was a photo. Ryan, found, in the back seat of a black car. My hands went cold. Whoever Edward worked with had just made their move. And now my son, my blood or not, was their hostage. The man they thought was too old, too broken, too weak, was about to remind them what a lifetime of surviving really looks like. The photo of Ryan tied up in that car didn't just shake me. It ignited something. For 65 years, I'd lived a quiet life, taking orders, opening doors, following rules. But that man, the obedient driver, the calm father, died the moment I saw my son's face bruised and gagged. I printed the photo, pinned it to the wall, and stared at it until dawn. Somewhere behind those terrified eyes was the same boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street, the one who'd whispered, "Dad, don't let go." And I hadn't, not once. I wasn't about to start now. At sunrise, I went to Harper's office early, my hands trembling around a paper cup of bitter coffee. He looked older than I remembered, more gray than Badge. You got my message? I asked. Yeah, he said, leaning back. This mess is bigger than anything I've seen in years. Edward Monroe's death. That wasn't suicide. He was under investigation by the SEC for embezzlement through shell companies. And Ryan? Ryan's been taken, I interrupted, sliding the photo across his desk. Harper's eyes hardened. Damn it, Sam. This is organized crime territory. Monroe's old partners. They're ghosts. No names, no addresses, just numbers and money trails. I stared at the photo again. Then I'll find their faces myself. He sighed, rubbing his temples. You're not young anymore. You go digging alone, they'll bury you next to him. Then I'll take my shovel with me. Harper smirked faintly, like he recognized that old stubbornness from years ago. He handed me a file. Start here. Edward's driver logs. Before he died, he had one last ride booked. Names listed as Vargas. Drop-off near Red Hook Pier. That's where your answers start. That night, I drove my old Chevy to the docks. The air reeked of salt and diesel, cranes looming like skeletons against the fog. Red Hook was the kind of place where secrets came to sink. I parked near Warehouse 17, the one listed on the log. The doors were half open, flickering light spilling through the cracks. Inside, I could hear voices, muffled but sharp. 2 men, one tall, one heavyset. He shouldn't have sent that file. Doesn't matter now. The old man's dead and the kid's next. They were talking about Ryan. My pulse thundered in my ears. I moved closer, staying behind a stack of shipping crates. They opened a laptop, and I caught a glimpse of the screen. Bank transfers. Millions of dollars, coded under Lakeside Property Holdings. That's when I realized the entire Lakeside complex I'd built for Margaret's dream was being used to launder dirty money. Edward hadn't just left me property. He'd left me a crime scene. I stepped back quietly, but my boot hit a loose wrench. It clattered against the concrete. Both men turned. Who's there? I ran. Bullets tore through the air, echoing like thunder against the metal walls. I ducked behind a forklift, heart pounding, every breath burning in my chest. When they paused to reload, I bolted through the side exit, sprinting down the pier until I dove behind a stack of wooden pallets. From there, I watched them get into a car, the same black sedan from the photo. My son was inside. I could see the faint outline of his head against the window, slumped but moving. He was alive. I started the Chevy and tailed them at a distance, keeping the headlights off. They drove through the city, winding into an old industrial district near Brooklyn. Finally, they stopped at a derelict factory marked Brighton Steelworks. 2 guards stood outside. No chance of getting in quietly. So I did what I always did best. I waited. Hours passed. Midnight crept in. when the guards stepped away to smoke. I slipped through a side door. Moving slow, my flashlight dimmed. The building was silent, except for the hum of distant machinery and the faint echo of water dripping through rusted pipes. Then I heard it, muffled crying. Ryan. I followed the sound to a small office at the back. He was tied to a chair, duct tape over his mouth, a bruise across his cheek. When he saw me, his eyes widened, not with joy, but disbelief. Dad? He mumbled through the tape. I pressed a finger to my lips and started cutting the ropes with my pocket knife. Quiet, we don't have long. He winced. Why'd you come? They'll kill you. I've been killed by life more times than they can count. Before I could finish, a shadow fell across the doorway. One of the men, the tall one, was there, gun raised. End of the road, old man. I lunged, slamming the metal chair into his arm. The gun went off, ricocheting off the wall. Ryan kicked his leg, sending the weapon sliding toward me. I grabbed it and fired once, not to kill, just to scare. The man screamed, clutching his shoulder as he fell back. Ryan and I ran. Through the hallways, past broken machines, through a door that burst open into the freezing night. We didn't stop until we reached the car. Ryan collapsed in the passenger seat, gasping for air. Dad, you shouldn't have done this. I told you. I don't let go. I drove through the night, the city lights flashing past like ghosts. When we finally stopped in front of my apartment, he turned to me, eyes red. Why did you come for me after everything I said? After how I treated you? I looked at him, my hand still shaking on the wheel. Because you're my son, not by blood, not by paper, but by choice. And that's the one thing they'll never take from me. He didn't reply. Just sat there, tears silently streaming down his face. And for the first time since Margaret's death, I felt something I hadn't in years, peace. But peace never lasts long, because as we stepped into my apartment, the lights flickered, and the TV turned on by itself. A live video feed filled the screen. Warehouse 17, dozens of boxes marked Lakeside Holdings. And then, Harper stepped into frame. Sorry, Sam, he said into the camera. You were supposed to hand it over quietly. Ryan turned to me, confused. Dad, what's going on? I stared at the screen, realization burning in my chest. Harper wasn't on our side. He was the side, and now he knew exactly where we were. The television glowed in the dim apartment, flickering like a heartbeat. Harper's face filled the screen, calm, collected, smug. Sorry, Sam, he said again, his voice smooth as ice. You were supposed to hand it over quietly. The screen went black. Ryan turned to me, his voice shaking. Dad, what did he mean? Hand what over? I didn't answer right away, because deep down I already knew. The fortune, the one hidden under Margaret's name, in that offshore account, the one Edward helped me set up years ago to protect Ryan's future. It wasn't money from inheritance or luck. It was dirty money, funneled from Edward's shell, companies into Margaret's account to hide from investigators. When she died, it all transferred to me, and now Harper wanted it. He wasn't an honest detective anymore. He was one of them, the last piece of Edward's empire, now wearing a badge. I grabbed my coat and opened the drawer. My revolver sat there, cold and untouched, for over 20 years. I never liked guns. I'd seen enough death to know bullets rarely end anything cleanly. But this wasn't about violence. This was about closure. Stay here, I told Ryan. No, he said, his jaw tight. I'm coming. I hesitated, but the look in his eyes told me there was no stopping him. For the first time, he wasn't the arrogant man chasing power. He was the scared boy I used to read bedtime stories to. So I nodded, and together we went out into the night. We drove in silence. The city shimmered under rain, every traffic light reflecting red against the windshield. Ryan stared out the window, whispering. I thought I knew what success meant. All this time I was just playing his game. I glanced at him. Edward's world was built on greed. Yours doesn't have to be. When we reached Warehouse 17, the place was alive, engines running, men shouting orders, crates being loaded into trucks. Harper stood at the center in a long black coat, cigarette between his lips. He looked right at me as we stepped out. Didn't think you'd actually show, old man. You took my son, I said. You brought this to my door. Why? He smiled. Because you're the only loose end left. Edward's dead, the partners are gone, and you have what belongs to us. $40 million, the Monroe Fund. I'm here to collect. Ryan stepped forward. You're not getting a cent. Harper's men laughed, circling closer. I counted 6 of them, armed. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. You think you're a hero? Harper sneered. You're a driver, Sam. You follow directions. That's all you've ever been. I looked him dead in the eye. You're right. I follow directions. But tonight, I'm giving them. Before he could react, I tossed my old key fob onto the ground. He frowned. Then, a deafening roar. The black Mercedes I'd parked across the street, Edward's old car, exploded into flames. The blast sent men scattering, the shockwave throwing Harper off his feet. Smoke filled the air. Ryan grabbed my arm. Dad, what did you do? The fuel tank's empty, I said. Just fireworks. But they don't know that. We ran toward the pier, bullets slicing through the smoke. I ducked behind a shipping container and pulled Ryan down with me. There's a back exit, go. What about you? I'll cover you, go. He hesitated, tears mixing with rain. I'm not leaving you again. You won't have to. I pushed him toward the alley. Then I turned back. Harper was limping toward me, gun raised. You should have stayed retired, Sam. You should have stayed honest. He fired. The bullet grazed my shoulder, but I didn't fall. I aimed not at him, but at the electrical box behind him. The lights blew out. Sparks rained. He screamed, dropping his weapon as wires burst into flame. I staggered forward, bleeding but steady. It's over, Harper. He looked up, half blinded, snarling. You think this changes anything? You'll still die broke. I shook my head. I've been rich my whole life. You just never saw how. Then the sirens came. Blue and red lights flooded the docks. Real police this time, federal agents. Ryan had called them from the car. They swarmed in, weapons drawn, surrounding Harper and his men. I sank to the ground as they cuffed him, the cold rain washing over my face like mercy. Hours later, at the hospital, I sat in a white gown, shoulder bandaged. Ryan sat beside me, silent. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out the flash drive, the same one Edward left behind. I gave it to the feds, he said. All of it. The accounts, the names, everything. They said you won't face charges. You were a victim, not an accomplice. I smiled faintly. You did good, son. He looked at me for a long time. Eyes full of guilt and something softer, something real. Dad, I don't deserve you. No, I said quietly. You don't, but you've still got me. He laughed through tears. And for the first time in decades, he held my hand like he used to. Weeks passed. The investigation ended. Harper was gone. The money, all of it, was seized by the government. But there was one thing left. A single letter found in Edward's safe addressed to me. Sam, you may never forgive me, but I want you to know. The lakeside property was built from the ashes of my sins. The money you think was dirty became something clean because you made it that way. It gave people homes. It gave your wife peace. That was always Margaret's wish. Not for wealth, but for redemption. Don't let it die with me. Edward. I folded the letter, placed it in my coat, and walked outside. The air smelled like rain and hope. Ryan met me by the curb, keys in hand. Where to, old man? He asked, smiling for the first time in years. I looked down the street, the city stretching out like an unfinished road. Anywhere but back. He nodded, starting the car. As we pulled into the quiet dawn, I watched the skyline fade in the mirror. The life I'd driven for everyone else finally behind me. And for the first time, I wasn't driving for Edward, or for Margaret, or for forgiveness. I was driving home.